Crackdown is one of those games that I briefly checked out upon finally getting myself a 360 late last generation, and while it was rough around the edges, it was definitely fun. And I think there's something to be said about big, dumb, fun games that you can switch your brain off and just play. I really think we're in short supply these days, but I also think we can probably do better than Crackdown 3. Crackdown 3 takes place after a terrorist attack blacks out the entire world's power save for one city, New Providence. This city is backed by a shady corporation known as Terra Nova, whose leaders are cruel, power-hungry manipulators, and it's up to the agency to track them down and put an end to their control. Unfortunately, before you even get boots on the ground, an attack wipes nearly all of the agents out, with the sole survivor having their body restored, but their abilities reset to zero in the process. The game's premise is weirdly compelling despite its simplicity. I'm always a sucker for any game with a hit list of bosses to take down, and there is something inherently satisfying about working your way up the hierarchy, starting with the smaller thugs and eventually taking the fight to the head of the corporation herself. The problem is that you never get to spend much time with any of these antagonists. You'll get a little animated graphic introducing each of them after you take down your first of many operations, and there are plenty of audio logs fleshing them out more than not at all, if you're into that kind of thing, but you never get a really good sense of them as characters. Which is a shame because individually I think their visual designs have plenty of potential for personality, even if the voice acting does let them down a little bit. Honestly, the high point for Crackdown 3's presentation is its opening cutscene. It features Terry Crews being Terry Crews and looks pretty damn good, which is jarring because the rest of the game looks like a late Gen 360 game. It's clean looking and there are some nice particle effects sometimes, but otherwise it's pretty underwhelming on the original Xbox One, especially with the constant hitching that occurs every time you approach a new side mission. Or mission thing. There aren't really any side missions. Every side mission is a mission, or every mission is a side mission. There are side missions and bosses? I don't know, let me start over. The game drops you into New Providence and scatters a bunch of stuff to do across the map. Most notable among these are operations that you need to put an end to. These vary from civilian prisons that must be liberated, evil monorail stations to de-evil, and chemical plants to shut down. Generally speaking, each of these operations will give you a certain amount of enemies to kill, or computers to hack, or machines to destroy, and though the core gameplay itself can be fun, these tend to wear thin pretty quickly. There are about 5 or 6 of each type of operation sprinkled across the map, and though there's a good variety of them on the surface, they all feel the same at the end of the day. Mercifully, the boss fights against each Terra Nova leader are dashes of excitement amidst the rest of Crackdown 3's repetitive operations. For the most part, they're all just massive health bars to whittle down, but they usually have some sort of gimmick or pattern to figure out, though I did find that they relied a little too much on hordes of additional enemies to keep them challenging. Instead of the boss fights themselves being great, fun challenges, the game just throws a tidal wave of enemies at you every time, which is really just sort of annoying. But like I said, the core gameplay itself is fun, to start with at least. Running and jumping feels responsive, and the lock-on focused gunplay encourages lots of mobility. You get a decent variety of guns ranging from mundane pistols and machine guns to laser weapons and explosives, so the game's focus ends up being on fast-paced chaos rather than precision shooting, and it is fun. The problem is that there isn't much depth to be found. You'll get your hands on some neat gadgets over time, and Crackdown 3 will eventually throw some more interesting enemies your way, but there's no engaging way to really combine weapons or gadgets, and while the way your character increases in power throughout the game is fairly engaging, there are only a couple of benefits you gain that really feel worthwhile. So your agent starts at a base level of power. They can jump fairly high, they can punch dudes and throw objects, they can drive, they can shoot, but your agent will slowly get better at these as you do them. Your bullets and explosives will do more damage, your punches will be more powerful, and you'll be able to lift and throw cars eventually. I imagine your driving will also get better, but I literally never found a reason to drive. For one thing, every car handles like a shopping trolley with half of the wheels locked, and if you're driving, you'll be missing out on a ton of agility orbs that litter the rooftops. I honestly think collecting these orbs was the most fun I had with the game. Crackdown 3's platforming is surprisingly responsive, and as far as level up rewards go, I think the double jump and multiple air dashes are about as fun as they get. Apart from maybe picking up cars and chucking them at random thugs, that shit never gets old. You can get yourself a sweet spider car, but that would mean driving other cars, and I don't think that's worth it at the end of the day. Now, if you're worried about there being a lack of content, don't be. There are plenty of agility orbs to get, and there are more operations to shut down than you actually need to be able to hit the final boss. And beyond the main campaign, Crackdown 3 features a multiplayer, which is fine, I guess. I barely played any of it because by the time I had finished the campaign, I was totally burnt out on the game. Crackdown 3 is mediocre. It's good fun for an hour or two at a time, but for its relatively short runtime of 6 to 8 hours, it doesn't have enough going on to stay interesting. The core platforming and gunplay is fun and feels pretty good, but the driving is awful and the mission structure is so repetitive. It is currently free with Xbox Game Pass, so if you have that service then it's worth taking a look, I guess, but I wouldn't recommend paying for Crackdown 3.